They told you it was love. They wrapped their demands in concern, their restrictions in care, and their manipulation in affection. But what they really wanted wasn't connection, it was control, the kind that starts subtly. I'm just worried about you. I only want what's best. Trust me, I know you. But with time, the concern becomes command, and the care becomes coercion. Love, the purest force in the world, should set you free, but theirs clipped your wings, and called it protection. You see, real love doesn't shrink you. It doesn't confuse obedience with commitment. But when control enters the room, love quietly exits. Suddenly, you find yourself second, guessing every word, walking on emotional eggshells, apologizing for things you never did, just to keep the peace. That's not love. That's manipulation masquerading as intimacy. There's a dark brilliance in how control disguises itself. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand outright. It conditions you to self-abandon. Until one day, you can't tell the difference between your desires and their expectations, and they call it devotion, but what it really is dependency, manufactured, engineered, maintained, and the most dangerous part. It teaches you to question yourself more than you question them. Every instinct, every gut feeling, you bury it, because their voice becomes louder than your own. Love should make you feel safe to disagree, to breathe, to be. Control punishes honesty and calls it betrayal. It labels your growth as selfishness. It creates a world where loving them means losing yourself. But here's the truth. Walking away isn't disloyalty, it's clarity. When love becomes a battlefield where only one voice survives, stepping out isn't quitting, it's reclaiming. You are not here to be molded into someone else's ideal. You are not here to be ruled, silenced, or subdued in the name of love. You are here to live, to rise, to remember who you were before they told you who you should be. So no, it wasn't love. It was a lesson, and now that you've seen it for what it was, you are free. Control disguised as care in the beginning, it rarely looks like control. It looks like concern. It sounds like protection. I'm only doing this because I care, they say. I just want you to be safe. At first, it feels reassuring. Someone taking initiative, showing interest, stepping in to help make your life better. You tell yourself it's love. You tell yourself this is what closeness looks like. But over time, something shifts. What started as guidance becomes regulation. They begin to question your choices, not out of curiosity, but with quiet judgment. You feel it in their tone, in the subtle pressure to choose what they would choose. Suddenly, you're hesitating before making decisions you used to make freely. You're second, guessing whether your independence is too much. You're shrinking slowly, silently, and yet they keep saying they love you, so it must be love. Right, that's the trap. Control rarely announces itself. It doesn't show up with loud demands. It shows up in suggestions that feel like obligations. It hides in the small choices they want to help you make. The clothes you wear, the people you talk to, the dreams you pursue. They wrap their preferences in the language of care, but care doesn't suffocate. Real love empowers your freedom. It doesn't fear it. You start to notice patterns. They get upset when you spend time with certain people. They don't celebrate your wins unless they had a hand in them. They're uneasy when you express opinions that challenge theirs, and slowly the room for your authentic self gets smaller. The more you conform, the calmer things seem. The more you comply, the less conflict there is. But peace built on your silence isn't peace, it's pressure. And when you try to speak up, when you try to name what's happening, the narrative flips. You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. You always assume the worst. They don't acknowledge the impact of their control. They frame it as your inability to appreciate love. But love, at its core, isn't about possession. It's not about managing someone into obedience. It's about choosing someone and still allowing them to choose themselves. You may even find yourself defending their behavior to others. They just care too much. They're only trying to protect me. It becomes easier to explain it away than to admit the truth, because admitting it would mean rethinking everything you believed about the relationship. And that's a heavy thing to carry, but there comes a moment, a quiet, sobering moment, where you recognize that what they call love has started to cost you something sacred, your voice, your direction, your confidence, and in that moment you begin to see clearly. This isn't love that holds you. It's control that confines you. True love never asks you to lose yourself. It doesn't operate from fear or the need to dominate. It welcomes your individuality, your strength, your evolution. It grows with you, not around you like a fence. The one who truly loves you will never feel threatened by your freedom. In fact, they will fight to protect it. So if what you're feeling no longer resembles safety, if you find yourself editing your truth to keep someone else comfortable, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this love, or is it control, cleverly wrapped in concern? Because the difference is everything. Emotional manipulation isn't compassion. There is a quiet kind of harm that doesn't yell, doesn't threaten, and doesn't leave visible wounds. It lives in the subtleties, wrapped in sweet words and emotional pleas. It's the kind of manipulation that presents itself as tenderness, as affection, as devotion. You don't even notice it at first, because it wears the mask of love. But emotional manipulation isn't compassion. It's influence used not to understand you, but to influence your choices without your full awareness. Manipulation thrives where clarity is absent. It confuses guilt with loyalty and responsibility with surrender. It plays on your sense of empathy. When you try to set a boundary, you're told you're being distant. When you speak your truth, you're met with silence, emotional withdrawal, or exaggerated disappointment. Suddenly, you're not just defending your needs, you're defending your right to have any. They might say things like, "After all I've done for you," or "I just wish you cared the way I do." These phrases aren't direct commands, but they place the weight of the relationship squarely on your shoulders. You start feeling that their happiness or their peace is something you're obligated to maintain. But in reality, their feelings are not your responsibility to manage. Love is mutual, not a burden placed on one person to constantly carry the emotional weight for both. Emotional manipulation often appears in moments of vulnerability. When you're confused, tired, or unsure of yourself, that's when the pressure increases. Instead of offering clarity, they offer conflict. Instead of support, they offer confusion. You're left unsure of what just happened, but certain you've done something wrong. And this uncertainty doesn't bring you closer. It wears you down. Compassion listens. Manipulation accuses. When you're in a compassionate relationship, even conflict feels safe because both people are seeking truth and understanding. But in a manipulative dynamic, conflict becomes a test, one where you're expected to prove your loyalty by backing down, staying silent, or apologizing for things that were never your fault. They may not raise their voice, but they raise emotional stakes. They might not criticize openly, but they imply that your choices are ungrateful or selfish. It becomes difficult to tell if you're making decisions because you want to, or because you're afraid of disappointing them. And that fear is not the fruit of love. It's the residue of control, painted over with emotional theatrics. One of the most telling signs of manipulation is how often you feel the need to explain yourself. You find yourself rehearsing conversations in your mind, trying to word things just right, so they won't take it the wrong way. You're constantly anticipating their reaction, trying to manage their emotions before they're even expressed. That's not love, that's walking on emotional eggshells, and it slowly chips away at your confidence. Compassion doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't require you to hide, shrink, or perform emotional acrobatics to be accepted. A truly compassionate person creates space for your emotions without turning them into weapons. They hear your no without interpreting it as rejection. They allow disagreement without labeling it as betrayal. So, when you start to feel like love means losing your emotional stability, it's time to look more closely. Are you being loved, or are you being conditioned to serve someone else's comfort at the expense of your own clarity? Emotional manipulation is subtle, but its effects are deep. It teaches you to question your worth, your instincts, your very reality. But the truth is, your emotions matter. Your perspective matters. And real love will never ask you to sacrifice those things in exchange for peace. What you need is not control disguised as care, nor pressure disguised as passion, but compassion that invites your full humanity to the table. Dependency is not devotion in many relationships, especially the ones where emotions run deep. It's easy to confuse devotion with dependency. One seems admirable loyalty, commitment, presence. The other sounds dangerous. Attachment, fear of separation, emotional reliance. But the truth is, the difference between the two isn't always obvious at first. Dependency often wears the costume of devotion, and by the time you notice the difference, you may already feel emotionally trapped. Devotion is a conscious choice. It's built on strength. Two people choosing to walk together even when they could walk alone. Dependency, on the other hand, grows from fear, fear of being alone, fear of losing someone's attention, their affection, their presence. It doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a necessity, not because of love, but because of how much of yourself you've poured into them without keeping enough for you. When you are dependent, you begin to center your life around another person's needs, moods, and validation. You feel unsettled if they haven't checked in. You question your worth if they seem distant. You adjust your priorities not because it's healthy compromise, but because their disapproval feels unbearable. You call it love, but deep down, it's about avoiding abandonment. This is where the danger lies. Healthy devotion respects boundaries. It celebrates the individuality of both people involved. Dependency removes those lines. It blends identities. You begin to forget where you end and they begin. Their opinions become louder than your inner voice. Their feelings become the guiding force behind every decision you make. And slowly, your sense of self fades into the background. The sad reality is that some people encourage this dependency. They feel more secure when you are uncertain. They feel more powerful when you rely on them for your emotional stability. Not because they want to hurt you, but because it gives them a sense of control. And when you begin to detach, they may call it distance, disloyalty, or a lack of love, when in truth, it's just you returning to yourself. It's important to understand that needing someone isn't wrong. Human beings are wired for connection. We are designed to love and be loved. But the healthiest relationships are those where both people can stand on their own, yet choose to stand together, where togetherness is a desire, not a survival strategy. Devotion means choosing each other, not clinging to each other. It means supporting one another's growth, not fearing it. It means saying, I love who you are and I want to walk beside you, instead of saying, I need you to complete me, or I don't know who I am. Ask yourself, if they walked away today, would you still recognize yourself in the mirror? Could you still pursue your dreams, your goals, your purpose? If the answer is no, it may not be devotion holding the relationship together. It may be dependency keeping you from letting go. And that kind of attachment is not love. It's fear wrapped in emotional language. The journey out of dependency doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you give up on connection. It means you begin to rebuild the relationship with yourself, the one that got quiet while you were trying so hard to keep someone else happy. It means you relearn how to stand, so that when you walk alongside someone again, it comes from strength, not survival. Love should feel like a choice, not a lifeline, and when it becomes the latter, it's time to pause and ask, am I truly devoted, or have I become dependent? Only one of those paths leads to freedom. Real love requires accountability. Love, in its truest form, is not fragile. It doesn't collapse under honest questions, nor does it shatter when boundaries are introduced. In fact, real love welcomes accountability, because love without truth isn't stable, it's surface level. If someone tells you they love you, but refuses to take responsibility for how their actions affect you, then what they're offering might be comfort, attention, or affection, but it's not love in its full and mature form. Accountability is not about blame, it's about awareness. It's about the willingness to pause and reflect when someone you care about says, "That hurt me." It's not a personal attack, it's an invitation to look closer. But when love lacks this willingness, it starts to drift into something more self-centered. It becomes about preserving an image, not protecting a connection. Many people say they love deeply, but what they really love is the version of the relationship where they are never wrong. The moment they feel challenged, they withdraw. The moment they feel uncomfortable, they turn defensive. They see accountability as a threat to their authority or their goodness, rather than a necessary ingredient of healthy growth. But the truth is, you can't build anything lasting with someone who refuses to see their part in the problem. Real love doesn't fear confrontation. It sees it as a tool. It understands that conflict is not the opposite of love. It's often the gateway to deeper understanding. When someone says, "What you did made me feel small," and the other person listens, not to defend themselves, but to understand, that's love in motion. That's what it means to value another person's experience just as much as your own. Too often, people mistake silence for peace. They believe that if no one is arguing, everything must be fine. But silence can be a form of emotional suppression. A relationship where one person is never allowed to express pain or frustration without being labeled as dramatic or difficult is not a peaceful relationship. It's a controlled one, and control cannot coexist with accountability because control seeks to avoid consequences, not to take responsibility for them. In relationships without accountability, mistakes are repeated, not resolved. Apologies are vague, and behavior rarely changes. One person feels stuck in a cycle of being hurt, and then having to justify why they were hurt. The focus shifts from repairing the relationship to protecting someone's ego. But love that can't look in the mirror isn't love that can last. Being accountable doesn't mean you'll never fall short. Everyone makes mistakes, but it means when you do, you're willing to acknowledge it. You're willing to ask, "How did this affect you?" and mean it. You're willing to learn, to grow, and to adjust, not out of fear, but out of respect. That kind of love builds trust. It creates safety. It fosters openness. Ask yourself, is the person I'm with open to hearing feedback without turning cold or defensive? Do they genuinely try to make things better when something goes wrong, or do they avoid the conversation altogether? Do they take ownership of their words and actions, or do they always redirect the blame? These questions matter because without accountability, love has no anchor. It floats on appearances and expectations but lacks the depth that makes it real. Love that lasts is not love that's perfect. It's love that's responsible. It's love that is willing to look itself in the eye and say, I have room to grow, and I care enough about you to grow with you. Because where there is no accountability, there can be no trust. And without trust, love slowly becomes performance, not partnership. Walking away is not betrayal. There's a deep guilt that often follows the decision to walk away from someone you once loved. Especially when that person told you, time and time again, that staying meant loyalty and leaving meant betrayal. You internalize the message that love must endure anything, that walking away is giving up, that it makes you cold or ungrateful. But the truth is much more complex than that. Walking away is not betrayal. Sometimes it is the most honest and courageous act of love. Love for yourself, and love for the truth of what the relationship has become. Because love, real love, cannot exist in a place where your well-being is constantly compromised, where your voice is dismissed, or where your spirit is slowly fading. People will often say, no relationship is perfect, and that's true. Every relationship will face challenges. But when the problems become patterns, when your needs are consistently ignored, your boundaries repeatedly crossed, or your emotions invalidated, it stops being a rough season and starts becoming a reality that harms more than it heals. You may have tried everything. You may have communicated, compromised, forgiven, adjusted. You may have silenced your own discomfort to keep the peace. But peace without inner alignment is not peace, it's pretending. And pretending, for too long, will exhaust even the strongest heart. The fear of being seen as disloyal is powerful. It can keep people trapped in situations that no longer reflect mutual care. But staying somewhere just because you once made a commitment does not honor love, it distorts it. Commitments are sacred, yes, but they are not cages. They are meant to be upheld when both people are willing to protect the foundation they were built on. When one person continuously undermines that foundation, it's not disloyalty to leave, it's wisdom. You are not abandoning someone by refusing to abandon yourself. There is nothing noble about staying in a space where you are continually unseen or unheard. Sometimes, walking away is not about rejecting the other person. It's about recognizing that the version of you who stayed no longer exists, and the version of them who met you with care is no longer showing up. Even in difficult decisions, there is dignity. You don't need to hate someone to know it's time to leave. You can still wish them well, still hold on to the moments that were real, and still walk away, because the path forward no longer holds room for both of you, and that's not failure, that's maturity. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't love them enough. It means you finally started loving yourself in the places you had once neglected. It means you stopped trying to convince someone to treat you with the respect you deserve. It means you chose growth over cycles, healing over repeating patterns, and peace over prolonged hope in something that never fully showed up for you. It's important to remember that endings are not always evidence of weakness. Some endings are proof of evolution. They're the moment you realized your time, energy, and heart are worth being in a space where love is mutual, where effort is shared, and where truth isn't something you have to beg for. So if you've been carrying the weight of guilt, questioning whether leaving makes you heartless, ask yourself this: is love asking me to stay, or is fear trying to keep me from becoming who I truly am? Because the real betrayal is not walking away. The real betrayal is abandoning your voice to hold on to a connection that only survives when you remain silent. And the moment you realize that, you stop seeing departure as failure and start seeing it as freedom.